Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to another episode of On the Throttle with Jacqui and Josh. And as much as, hi and how's it going? I think Josh, it really should be buongiorno and como stai because this week is dedicated to all things Italian because we're talking all about we're doing a wrap-up show or a highlights show, I suppose, of the world's largest two-wheel expo, two-wheel trade show in the world, and that is EICMA in Milan. This show just took place last week. It runs for like 5 or 6 days. The first handful of days are manufacturers and press only, and then it is open to the public, and they get hundreds of thousands of people in those 3 or maybe 4 days that they're open, and it is massive and intense and crazy and global, and it's always clearly very exciting for me because it is a little bit of a pre-Christmas because it's all sorts of new bikes and prototypes and weird stuff, and I mean it's a little bit of everything, and so I definitely wanted to dedicate today's show to EICMA. What do you got to say about that, Josh?
To me, there's two things that really caught my attention in it, and I'm excited to talk about both of those. And we'll kind of touch on. It sounds like you're going to touch on a fair number of the topics. I'm going to focus on those two, and this is going to be exciting.
Oh, I think it's definitely exciting. The reports from EICMA so far are that the attendance was a little bit down, but I mean, what the difference between 500 and 400,000 people is that down? But it looked like really, really cool bikes coming out. Like I said, there's definitely some beautiful, beautiful bikes
Yeah.
in today's show, particularly from the Italians. No big surprise there. They are prone to making deliciously beautiful and sexy machines, especially
Yes.
at their great big home shows where they love to do their reveals. But there's also a huge Asia contingency that shows up to this event. I did not feature too many of them in today's show, but trust me, it is always like pushing the boundaries. There was tons of battery and EV stuff there.
Yes.
Again, I didn't touch too deep into that. I stuck with kind of more traditional machines. And with all that being said, Ashley, away we go. Let's throw that first slide up and talk about the first bike that I wanted to feature today. And Josh, this could not be any more timely because we just discussed the potential of this motorcycle coming to market. And sure enough, the folks over at MV Agusta delivered. And this is going to be the 5.5. And then also in one of the slides here coming up is the 9.5 Adventure bike. They've been teasing this out for a little while. They're paying a little bit of homage to their roots in the Wayback Machine, as it were, with Kajiva and the Elephant. This beautiful bike, though, look at this stunner, Josh. What do you think about that excellent adventure bike from the folks over at MV Agusta?
It's going to be interesting to see how they stack up technically. I mean, you're right. The Italians do art, moving art. The way it's going to stack up technically, like the 5.5 there, looks like it's either an 18 or a 19-inch front wheel. So seeing what area of the market that's aimed at, who that's competing with, it is a drop dead stunner. Head turner, all the above. I would definitely whistle as it went past. In the same sense, it's going to be interesting to see where they've got that fit for the market. I'm excited for that.
I think middleweight adventure market is a really, really smart play. Ashley, throw that slide back up there again, that very first one. That was the 5.5, this beautiful machine. Let's take another gander at it. I love the styling of it. It's just a beautiful, beautiful bike. And again, look at that, Josh. For a 550cc middleweight adventure, I think that is absolutely wonderful. And then the next slide is going to be the big brother, which is the 9.5. Again, this is referring to the displacement for both of these bikes. So it's going to be a 550 and a 950 respectively. I think just tons of style, very sexy. Again, we'll have to wait and see how they handle and perform in real life, but I think that is very exciting. So let's head on to our next slide. The next slide is going to be another beautiful bike from our friends over in Italy, if I remember correctly. Oh, there we go. One more side view, one more sexy side view of that 9.5, that 950. So you can take it in all of its glory. That tire does look like a 19-inch to me, Josh. So I think they kind of mean business. I mean, look at it. It's got the crash plate. It's got the, high upswept exhaust. It's got some guards on it. I think they mean business. I don't think they're monkeying around with that 9.5. And that is going to be from the folks over at MV Agusta. And then let's keep going forward into the slideshow for today. Another very cool little bike. This is the Benelli 125. And I threw this into the slideshow today because I thought this was so rad looking. Josh, what do you think about this little 125?
So, I mean, once again, it goes into that 125 genre that was really, I guess I would say, started kind of by the Grom. Um, Such a great area. Those bikes are just so much fun. You can't get on one of those and not have fun. And a big part of that is because every time you get on that, you can just beat their brains out. So a bike that has that type of personality, that looks the way that thing does, I'm excited
Yeah,
for it.
I think it's excellent. So Benelli has been rebooted by some Chinese folks. It still does have some, I believe, some Italian design team in charge of it, but it is made in China. But it is, a rebooted brand, which is still cool. It's got a lot of history, a lot of provenance. I have to admit, so Benelli kind of fell off of my radar years ago because obviously they fell off everybody's radar before they got rebooted. But I ran across a handful of these several years ago in Europe, and just really beautiful, beautiful fit and finish and boatloads of style. They were making a really neat, I think, little like 350 cafe racer type vibe. I thought it was just excellent. And so I wanted to go ahead and throw this guy up there. You're right. It kind of reminds me of some Grom vibes, maybe that new Navi that Honda just is putting out that we just talked about a couple of weeks ago. Speaking of, as always, you can go back on through and watch all of our videos out there on YouTube or on our Facebook page. If you miss any of these shows, you can always go back and click on them. But yeah, we talked about that Navi from Honda, and for some reason, the styling of this kind of reminds me of that. And again, that is going to be the Benelli. This is a 125. I think it's the Leoncino is the name of it. And let's get into our next slide. Okay, so speaking of Benelli, Josh, I know you have got to be excited about this bike. I think this was absolutely stunning. This is going to be another Benelli. This is a dirt bike from Benelli. Obviously, it screams adventure bike all over it. And again, you can't swing a dead cat without hitting an adventure bike in the marketplace these days. Everybody is getting into the adventure game, and the folks at Benelli did not want to be left behind. So they are releasing this very cool TRK, if I remember that correctly. I believe it's an 800cc displacement machine. So far, this is slated, I believe, to only be European market and maybe Asia market only. Which, what do you think about that, Josh? Does all the best stuff stay overseas or what?
I guess I would say yes and no on that. I did, when I knew we were going to talk about that one, I dove into some of the specs on it. And it is, I mean, when you look at what Benelli does, they've got this great styling, and that thing is gorgeous. She's a little chunky though. Is that bike weighs just a couple of pounds less than the 1290 KTM. So when you compare the two, there, I mean, jumping into the adventure category, does this thing have a niche for it? Is it going to fit in somewhere? For sure, because everyone wants to get off road, and especially to get that type of look with probably a little bit better price point. Yes, I'm calling it a win, but it's going to be interesting to see where it slides in. And it's one of those bikes I hope we get, but I can see it not happening.
Yeah, so some of the specs on it are is it's good for 76 horsepower and 48 foot-pound torque. Benelli claims a dry weight of nearly 500 pounds, which, as you mentioned, is pretty beefy. That is only maybe 50 pounds lighter than the 1250 BMW GS. But all that being said, though, at the smaller displacement, maybe it's going to have a smaller seat height as well. So I think this has a lot of potential to be a big win. I know because I belong to the 5'2" crew. I am always an advocate for shorter bikes, even in the adventure and dirt bike category, knowing that 90% of those machines live on tarmac and don't actually see dirt unless it's by accident. I'm going to go ahead and say enough with the super tall adventure bikes, and we need more short adventure bikes. So I think that this Benelli is a win. However, what is not a win, wop, 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 is no plans yet for entering the US market. But I've got a sneaking suspicion that they are definitely going to end up here. The segment is huge.
Yeah.
I think they're just kind of biding their time and waiting to see how things go in Europe and Asia first, possibly capturing a little cash over there in order to bootstrap a larger US effort. Now, that was going to be, again, the Benelli TRK 800, that awesome sand colored machine. Next slide up, Miss Ashley. All right, so this, Josh, oh my goodness. This is one of the, like, at the top of my list, beautiful, dead sexy Italian heartthrob, Italian stallion. This is a new bike from the folks at Bimota. So Bimota, if you are not familiar, they are a company that has been around for a handful of years. They do have a decent history. Their history is very interesting to me because they do not technically manufacture the entire bike start to finish in-house. They are more of an assemblage type company. But what they do assemble, they assemble from the most premium, best of the best bits across the globe. So everything has the most top of the line product on it. The best brakes, the best forks, the best everything going into these bikes, which makes them very boutique and also a very, very small, I'm going to use the word manufacturer, although technically I don't think they're a manufacturer. But anyway, so this is the folks over at Bimota. This is going to be their first machine. Is that right? Their first machine since they were purchased by Kawasaki in its more recent history. So this, no surprise, Josh, this is powered by a Kawasaki engine, but look at the styling on this beast. Oh my God, look at the lines, look at the gold wheels. Josh, what do you think about this stunner?
So the first two things that I saw about it there are when you look at that black strip down the side of it and that really thick, tall swing arm. Both of those to me harken back to the SB8R, which was right around, we'll say, turn of the century, turn of the millennium. I mean, phenomenal bike. It was, like you said, I mean, they usually kind of assembled parts. That was a Suzuki TL1000R powered bike. So, I mean, to me, it throws back to that and that brilliant styling that they had. But they managed to also have the function with the form on that. And were always brilliant handling bikes, brilliant sounding bikes, just joys to ride. So this is one where I think, yeah, this is going to be a pretty good hit.
Yeah, so the way that this company also works, just a little pro tip for my friends out there that are watching. So Bimota, whenever they use the power plant that they use, the initial goes into the naming of it. So this bike is going to be called the K for Kawasaki B4, and it comes in two different packages. One is the slide that we just showed you, which is a little bit more of like the naked, street fighter vibe. And then the next slide that's going to be coming up here in just 1 second is going to be the very, very beautiful. This is going to be a front shot of that bike, so keep going forward. Is going to be a shot of the more retro styled. It has a front fairing on it. This guy. Look at this guy, Josh. Look at that front fairing on this machine. Woo, mama mia. I love this bike. I think it is retro dead sexiness. I think it is absolutely wonderful. And that is going to be the new machines from Bimota. So let's go on forward with our next slide. And again, another side shot of that beautiful, beautiful bike. I think just an interesting style, Josh. It's almost like a retro machine, a little bit throwback. Speaking of things that are definitely not throwback, though, is the folks over at Moto Guzzi. Moto Guzzi have put together this beautiful 1100cc bike. This is the Moto Guzzi 1000cc V100 Mandello. Really excellent looking in this new signature paint scheme. I think this is very cool, Josh. What do you think about this bike?
To me, right off the bat, it strikes me as kind of I don't want to say carryover, but there were the days of the UJM, the Universal Japanese Motorcycle. And granted, it's an Italian bike. It's a Guzzi. I mean, there's nothing Japanese about it. But what was so great about those is they did absolutely everything well. And when I look at this thing, there's just enough fairing to keep the wind off of you. It's a riding position that looks like it could be days in the saddle without any issues. And the overall styling of it is just, I mean, there's sleek lines. I mean, this is the new universal motorcycle. Just the do everything, go anywhere, and have an absolute blast doing it. The way that thing looks, I like it.
I love it a lot, and it's definitely going to be considered a sport tour from the folks over at Moto Guzzi. Some of the specs on it is it's rated at 115 horsepower, torque is at 77 pound-foot, and that is really a ton of
Yeah.
juice. 115 pounds of 115 horsepower is really, really impressive for that bike. So sport, they're putting the sport in the sport tour
Yeah.
indeed. That bike does look like it's ready to go absolutely everywhere and eat up miles and have a ball doing it.
Yes.
About a year ago or so, they started releasing this anniversary celebration green and silver, green and gray type paint scheme. They put it on a handful of machines last year. They're continuing this tradition forward. It is a bit of an homage to one of their race bikes in the way back machine that was green. So that's why they're sticking with this green and silver or green and gray paint scheme. But I think it looks incredibly excellent. And again, with the gold wheels, Josh, I don't know what's going on with me and the gold wheels, but I am super duper here for it. I love it.
Yeah, that and the gold accents on the bike, and when you look at the valve cover tops there too, same thing. I mean, those rocker box covers just it's those perfect touches, the little accents that just draw enough attention. Agreed.
It is chef's kiss for sure. And now let's check out our next slide from EICMA. Okay, some more interesting news from yet another Italian company. It is going to be super Italian, hot and heavy on today's show. So I hope you buckled up and brought your gelato with you. This is going to be a new machine from Aprilia. This is a really beautiful limited edition bike. Aprilia campaigning a machine here in the United States this past season in the Moto America Race Series. They won the Twins Cup this year. So they decided to do a lovely tribute bike on their twin-based machine. They are only going to release, I think, 1,500 of these in this red, white, and blue paint scheme. And if I believe correctly, this is an RS660. Josh, what do you think about this awesome looking Aprilia?
So from the moment that that bike came out, I've liked it. I mean, and what I find so interesting is it has almost the same amount of horsepower that my old RSV Miele had back 20 years ago. Ironically, in that Aprilia did really have a great and super hard fought campaign in Moto America this year with that bike. So for them to do this paint scheme with it and do the tribute with it, yeah, it was almost a no brainer.
Yeah, I think it looks wonderful. Again, that is going to be a limited edition version of that bike, and it's only going to be 1,500 released. I was correct. And just a really beautiful, beautiful bike. And I think that that's wonderful, and that's why I wanted to feature it. Let's check out our next bike from EICMA. All right. So this was a little bit of a teaser. This technically was not revealed. This was not shown at EICMA. It just happened to be teased out during the week. And this is from the folks over at Yamaha. This is going to be one of their Ténérés. I believe this is a 700cc displacement, and they are doing a limited edition called the Raid, which is a more upgraded, heavier duty, I suppose is the way to explain it, off-road capable machine from the folks over at Yamaha. They did not have it live and in person to check out, so I just grabbed one of their press photos. But I think that looks incredible. Josh, what do you think about that beautiful Yamaha?
So the Ténéré, when it came out, kind of flipped the middleweight adventure world on its head. Because I mean, you got to realize that was a territory that wasn't really there, and it was dominated mainly by stuff like the either KTM, which with 790 and 890, or you had the old XR 650. So you had two opposite ends of the spectrum. Yamaha came out with an affordable middleweight adventure touring bike. In that, the affordable part, they had to trim some things. This Raid package is literally, they said, we're going to throw I believe it's the GYTR or GYRT catalog at it and to come out with this. And basically anything that anyone nitpicked about that bike has been taken care of with that parts list. And the capabilities of this bike are insane. If you look at what Paul Terrace has did, in a recent video that he launched, go check it out.
Nice. Yeah, no, I'm really excited about that. I think it looks awesome. You know, this Ténéré, this middleweight Ténéré, they've been teasing out for it feels like 500 years now. It's finally coming to market, and now they're releasing the one that actually has all the bells and whistles on it. So I think that that is very, very good news for the folks over at Yamaha. Next slide, please. And of course, it would not be EICMA if they did not have some stars from MotoGP on hand, including legendary, iconic Yamaha racer Valentino Rossi was in the house, and they had a day of him coming out and showing bikes. He was featuring some new machines from Yamaha. I'm sure he was absolutely swarmed. I don't think this was open to the public. I think this was just during a media only day because that hall would have gone bonkers with 400,000 people in it and Valentino Rossi all under one roof. I think Milan would have gone into space, but I just wanted to give him a little bit of love. They always have MotoGP stars there. I know that they had Fabio Quartararo there as well. Marc Marquez usually attends, but I think he was out with an injury. But anyway, a little bit of love for Valentino Rossi premiere, showing himself off and getting some love at EICMA this year. Next slide. All right, so one of the concepts that was floating around, one of the imaginary bikes, is going to be from the folks over at Royal Enfield. This is going to be a twin 650cc bike. Again, this is strictly concept. This is not real. This is a unicorn. This does not really exist, but they went ahead and are showing it anyway because I think that they are definitely headed into bobber category with this bike. What do you think, Josh? What do you think about this awesome little Royal Enfield?
I mean, to me, it's an evolution for them as they keep stepping forward. And you realize that they had the same motorcycle for 700 years and never did anything different. And now they're deciding to find. I mean, the big change was when they went from points to CDI. So I mean, that was the biggest change over like 50 years of the one motorcycle. So now, for them to start diving into stuff like this and building that following, they don't have an expectation. They don't have a genre that they've been sucked into or stuck into other than they made one bike for 700 years. Is so to step out into this and to do something new, creative and stuff like that. I love it because it's going to test the waters for them and show what they can do, what the road out in front of them is, if that's it or not.
For sure. And I think it's just the ideal platform to do a bobber off of.
Yeah.
It's a 650, it's a twin, it makes sense, it's the right size for when bobbers actually first kind of came around. It looks the part, it has all that retro look because they have been making motorcycles for 700 years. The dinosaurs used to ride them around. Because they have been making motorcycles for so long, I totally agree with you and your point that I think that they're in a really interesting time and space right now because especially in the last 10 years or so, they've really pushed some boundaries, right? Like imagine the Himalayan coming out 15 years ago. It never, ever, ever would have happened. It never would have said Royal Enfield. Nobody would have believed it. I wouldn't have believed it, and it wouldn't ever have happened. So I love that they're making these steps and these strides, and they're doing something really interesting with this twin 650 platform, getting away from their real, true small bikes. Now, here's the kicker, though. It's got to be the right price tag. I hope and I pray that they're going to keep, if they do go to market with this bobber, which it certainly smells like that's what they're cooking. I certainly hope that they keep it in the $7,000 price point, but that's just me. I think that would make a lot of very excited newer riders or second or third bikes in the garage for a lot of people. Anywho, so that's what's going on with the folks at Royal Enfield. They were showing a unicorn, and we'll have to wait and see if it materializes into an actual real bike, but I think it does. Next slide, Ashley. Okay, so again, there was a lot of different, much smaller, particularly Asia market manufacturers at EICMA this year. But holy smokes, you could not swing a dead cat without hitting two things: an adventure bike or an e-bike. E-bikes were there in force. It was E-Bike Bonanza, because EICMA is not only the world's largest motorcycle trade show, it is also the world's largest bicycle trade show. That's right, it's everything two wheels all under one roof. And so it's totally worlds colliding of bicycles with little hub motors and e-bikes and but larger e-bikes and these very cool, very scrappy kind of utilitarian, very modern in the middle, and then you look on the sides and it's bookended by very traditional scootery looking e-bikes. I think that this was really exciting, and there was just a boatload of this kind of stuff at EICMA this year. What do you think about that, Josh?
I mean, it makes sense. And as these two worlds get closer and closer, I mean, when you look at stuff like the Sur-Ron, that kind of started as a bicycle that they put just a boatload of batteries in and a monster of a motor, because that originally started with pedals. So, I mean, these worlds are colliding, and it makes sense to have those two together. And we're going to see a ton more crossover in the future. I mean, as commuters get smaller, or commutes get smaller, or people are at home more or less or whatever, things are going to evolve to fit what people need. And this is the next step.
So I agree with you. I think that there's just obviously there's a boom in this segment of the industry. As far as EICMA as a whole, I don't know if we've got another slide, Ashley. I don't know if we had another one coming up or not. But EICMA as a whole, I feel like was, it wasn't a real like earth-shattering year this year. It was a little bit of like just maintaining and doing business. The Italians are going to do what the Italians are going to do, which is build dead sexy motorcycles, and everybody else is just going to kind of polish the bikes that they're already making. I didn't really notice in the list, in the lineup, too many earth-shattering, like real mind-blowing things happening in the motorcycle segment. But where the mind-blowing stuff was happening at EICMA this year was in the e-bike segment. Not gonna lie, that's where things got real interesting and real rock and roll. And there was scooters and utility machines and little, like the little bird scooters. They had boatloads of that kind of stuff, but with more juice, because that's right, you need to go even faster on 4-inch wheels. That's where things were really, really spicy and really lively, in my opinion, at EICMA this year. What did you think about this wrap-up show, Josh?
So there is one thing that I thought was super interesting, and that is what Kawasaki has ventured to do with the H2 SX, if I remember correctly. So that is the first bike now to use the Bosch ARAS system. And Kawasaki released a diagram. I believe it's picture 21 is what I've got for you, Ashley, if you can throw that up, or 21 or 22. It's got the diagram of the bike. This is so all sorts of collision mitigation things on the motorcycle now is what it has available. That being said, what's so interesting about it is people talk about how that has been, if you look, there's blind spot notification, there's a front-facing radar sensor, a rear-facing radar sensor, and it all ties in with the display, the mirrors, and your speed sensor. So what this is doing is, so as we move forward, cars have had collision mitigation on them for a really, really long time. Motorcycles haven't done as much with it because we're moving faster. We're able to weave in and out of items, especially on a bike like this. If there is something coming up, the amount of time that it takes for a bike to stop compared with the amount of time it takes for a car to stop is much different. Also, with bikes, obviously, the cars, if you lock up tires, it's going to stay upright. Bike, you do that, it's not gonna end well. So the fact that they're venturing into this and they finally have the electronics in that good enough to start putting them on and trying them out on bikes like this, I think is amazing. Now, this, according to what I've seen on this so far, is only going to give you blind spot warnings, and the front-facing sensor is going to tell you if you are approaching something faster than you should be. Now, it's not going to apply the binders for you or anything like that, like some cars and trucks do. But this is that first step. And that's one of those things that I see that, I mean, initially people, when ABS came out on bikes, people were like, hey, this is terrible. But it took that little bit of an evolution. Seeing this on a bike is technology that I think is very cool, because it is going to start saving some lives, and very quickly. And that's a big part of it. So to me, it's, if it can save a couple of lives, what are your thoughts with that type of tech?
Oh, for sure. And you're right. The trickle down from cars to motorcycles with their technology, you're noticing it more and more and more
Yeah.
as time goes by. I don't know if they're just running out of bells and whistles to throw on motorcycles and now they think they have to put car stuff on them. I mean, but you're right. I think it's very cool. I think it does create more
Yeah.
safety. I think one of the more interesting things that I've seen on motorcycles recently, and I mean, I'm a Luddite. I ride very old bikes. I love the new tech, but I'm kind of like old school. But I do love some heated grips. I do love some comfort items like that. But I also think what's really neat is the adaptive cruise control, which is what that front
Yes.
radar on a lot of bikes is for, where it slows you down as you're coming up too quickly on another vehicle. It kind of latches you onto it and then it paces you with it. However, that being said, that adaptive cruise control, which I thought was very interesting, is you're right, it will not technically throw the brakes all the way on for you if there is something stopped. The thing in front of you has to be moving in order for the radar to latch onto it to slow you down. Like that's because it's a safety feature. If there was like a piece of rock or something in the road and it latched onto it, it would hit the brakes, and stop you. But it just needs it. So anyway, I don't know if I'm explaining it well or not, but the item in front of you has to be moving for that radar to latch onto it, is what I'm getting at. But again, it's a
Yeah.
really interesting bit of technology. If you've used it on a car, you know how handy it is, and I think it's even extra handier on motorcycles.
I agree. And it's one of those things every day I see a video where someone's like, look, ABS saved me this time. And I've seen so many videos where people go in, they skid, and all of a sudden the bike stands up. And I mean, they end up okay out of it. And that wouldn't have
Yeah.
happened because most people are, if you get a lockup, if your tendency is just same thing with a car, you're just going to grab a handful or footful more brake, which is only going to make it worse. So stuff like this, as we move forward with this technology, I'm excited for it.
Right on. And did you have something else from EICMA that really stood out to you? What did you think?
The one that I thought was kind of cool too is with Honda. Honda's always known for doing evolutionary stuff. Honda just released a new version of, I guess I would say, an old bike. Now, in this, I feel that they had a pirate name it. And this is my rendition of how this went down there for them. Now, the name of the bike is the Fireblade 1000 RR RSP. I said that last night and I'm like, oh my God, I am a pirate. So if we could pull that bike up real quick, to me, what I think is so cool about it is it celebrates what Honda did way back in 1992. That's the bike you see on the right there is the CBR 900RR. Rest of the world knew it as a Fireblade. We all knew it as the 900RR. This is 30 years of that. That bike really changed superbikes for everyone. But there wasn't a huge, big shift in what it did. It was just so many little changes that it changed everything. And to me, I am so glad that that bike came out. I've got a ton of miles on those original bikes. I'd like to try the new one too, especially with that paint scheme.
Yeah, I thought this was an absolute stunner. You're totally right. The homage to Fireblade, I thought that was really very cool. The paint, the livery of it to match the 30-year-old bike is just, I think they look
Yep.
incredibly cool side by side. You can see the lineage, you can see the history and connect the dots for yourself. And clearly it's a very, very important bike for the folks over at Honda. You're right. It's no slouch. That was a really beautiful, stunning bike to also come out of EICMA this year. Well, what do you think about that, everybody? Thank you so much for tuning in. This has been your EICMA La Dolce Vita Italian Roundup from Jacqui and Josh here at On the Throttle. Thank you so much for tuning in, everybody, clicking, liking, and sharing all of these videos with your friends. And we will see you next week.